Hey everybody. I wanted to make a video on a topic that might not be as popular as some more strategic stuff, but I actually think that this is probably one of the most important videos I can make, or at least one of the most important things to talk about for players that are recreational, maybe starting to take the game more seriously, really just for players, honestly, at all stakes. And I think the only reason it doesn't get talked about more is that not a lot of people have great solutions for it. Like, people have great solutions for what to do against someone that's overly aggressive, but not a lot of great people have great solutions for what I'm going to talk about. But I think I have a bit of a framework that might help, maybe more so than what other pros are talking about, and that's tilt. So just to give you a little bit of background, like I haven't been playing poker seriously for very long, but I am also doing my master's in psychology right now and learning on the way. I don't have an undergrad in psychology, so it's all kind of coming very fast. But um, I've learned some stuff about kind of why tilt happens, and hopefully some of that will be helpful here. Um, I think that another reason that tilt doesn't get talked about quite enough is that none of us really like to think of ourselves as the kind of player that goes on tilt ever, or significantly. And it's just one of those things that's really natural to underestimate. But to give you a sense of how powerful tilt is, or how powerful psychological factors are anyway, I was watching an interview that Magnus Carlsen gave since retiring, where he was letting out kind of some of his secrets. And he was saying how there are certain players, like in particular Wesley So, who he always had this huge psychological edge over, because if he could make a move and White had like what we'll call like 65% equity, if Wesley So took the low variance line, and White would have like 55% equity if Wesley So took the really chaotic high variance line. Wesley So would always take the low variance line because he was playing Magnus and he was scared. And he could use that information, Magnus could, to just run over Wesley, just being like, I can play this move that improves my position slightly, and I'm never going to get punished for it because Wesley's too scared, basically. And I think this is a powerful example because these are two people that have been playing chess at the highest level professionally all of their lives, like players that have been in the top 10 for basically a decade or more. I think Wesley has as well. And, they're worth a lot of money. They're basically celebrities in the chess world. And the psychological factor is still really damaging the win rate of Wesley versus Magnus. So you can only imagine what's happening to people like me and like you, who, are not Linus Love, are not Magnus Carlsen, and are not Wesley So. Um, and I think I'll come back to this in a second, but I just thought that it would be nice to start with this. These are my results more or less since November. I have like a sample of 15,000 hands on GG as well, but these are mostly my results. So I've been playing since like mid October, and I remember when I got this result in February and had been really trying to make a go at taking this game more seriously and playing as a part-time job. I was so upset. I don't know, I can't compare myself to someone else because I haven't lived their life, but like for me, I was really upset. I was blaming myself, I was blaming the other players, and most of all, I think I was afraid, not really of losing money, at least not directly. What I was afraid of was feeling stupid and feeling like I had put all of this time into poker and actually couldn't beat the games. And who was I to think that I could beat these games? And what a loser I am for like trying to play poker when I could just be, doing something more serious with my life. This is like negative self-talk, which we'll get into, right? I'm blowing things way out of proportion. Where a more healthy approach would be like, no, you're passionate about this game. It's great that you're pursuing a new challenge. It's great that you have the courage to do that. And it's okay to try and fail, right? But it's a lot easier to tell yourself that now, once you've had good results, than it is to think those kinds of thoughts in the moment. So, this result now, it doesn't look so bad. It's just like 16,000 hands at break even. But as someone who was just starting out, I'd had a good result in October. I lost 2K over 2,000 hands in November, get back into it in February, take another pretty big dip, and I was just hating life. And I definitely made a ton of punts at that time. So, and everybody knows the variance is a thing, but like hopefully this is just a little bit encouraging to see the incremental progress that's happened since then, and how, as I've gotten better and as variance has kind of eased up on me, it's, it was just a drop in the bucket at the end of the day. But of course, it never feels like that when you have, especially live, like if you have a month where things are not going your way, or 2 months, it's totally brutal. In fact, I've never been a live semi-professional, so I can't even imagine what that's like. Okay, so that's a long ramble, but I'll talk a little bit about frameworks for understanding why tilt happens and how we can use those frameworks to approach getting better with tilt. The last thing I'll say before we get into it is that, like every other part of the game, one way you can reframe tilt is not a weakness that is unique to you. Tilt is an opportunity to have a strength and an edge over your opponents. You are not alone for losing confidence or for disliking your play and feeling stupid and whatever, getting angry, punting. You're of course not alone in doing that. It's extremely human. And it is human for professional players as well. And if you acknowledge that it's not really your fault exactly for having emotional responses to the game, I think it's encouraging to recognize that it's a zero-sum game, and this is your opportunity to get better at a very real aspect of the game than your opponents are. And you can be less of a Wesley So and more of a Hikaru, and be someone that Magnus is probably like secretly slightly stressed out by, just by kind of having a different mental attitude. So same as you work on your 3-bet pots and your 4-bet pots and your whatever, you need to work on managing your psychology. And in doing that, you're going to get an edge, because other people are going to be exposed to this stuff too. And if they're not doing the work, then that's going to be win rate. This is one other kind of look on the bright side way of thinking about stress and tilt. I think that even though we all hate when things go really badly in poker, and we are all stressed out when that happens, the fact that that is a possibility, the fact that things can go badly for you and that you have to be on your toes and you have to be really sharp and critical and that mistakes can happen, is why I think we love the game of poker, and why I think people love just about anything they do competitively. And this has to do with like the difficulty of a task and the level of arousal it creates for the individual, and the difficulty, of course, being associated with the fact that failure is possible, basically by definition, right? So if you ever think to yourself, like, I want to quit poker, like this game sucks, like I hate everything about this game, what you should remind yourself is when you were having fun and when you were really enjoying it and when you were passionate about it, that feeling wouldn't have been possible were it not for the potential of negative outcomes in the first place. So without tilt, we can't really, or without like stress and pain and blood, we can't really have the game that we love. So that's one other kind of glass half full way of thinking about bad results in tilt. Okay, so I'm going to talk quickly, and this won't be much longer a video, I promise, but I'm going to talk about Lazarus's appraisal model of stress. So Lazarus was a physician from Quebec, Canada, and he had a model that went like this. When something happens in the environment, your first thing is you just determine whether it's relevant stimulus, right? Like you hear a really loud noise. Is it just like a car honking or something? And if you determine that it's not a relevant stimulus, then you have a physiological response before anything else. So your heart might kind of start beating faster, you start to have sweat, whatever else. And then you have a kind of further appraisal before you take action. And so Lazarus's model can be broken down into these three different ways that we can interpret a stressful event. The first is harm. So the damage is already done. There's nothing more that you can do to prevent that damage, and the damage isn't going to get any worse. So in a way, it's you kind of like your stress is already ramping down at this point. Like even though something bad has happened, you're not actually worried about, like if you get shot and you're bleeding out, this is we wouldn't think about harm this way. So the next is threat, and this is where I think tilt comes from. So we think when we get tilted that what's happening is that we're just angry, right? But anger is an emotion that is kind of always one layer above something beneath it. Anger is a protective mechanism, and it comes out when we feel some kind of threat to our personal or emotional safety. So some people like turn to anger when they're feeling sad. Some people turn to anger when their ego is being threatened. And, in the case of having a really bad outcome in poker, it can be both of those or one of those, certainly. Like I said, when I had that really bad month, my tilt was coming from the fact that I was afraid that I would get to the point where I had to confront the reality that I was never going to be beating 200 an L or 500 an L, and that I had wasted all of my time, and that I was a fool for having done that. That was the series of, that was the thought process that was creating the threat for me in the situation. Just as a tangent here, obviously poker is however you want to define it, in a way it's gambling, and people can have like gambling addiction and sort of haywire ways that they respond to stress. And I don't know anything about that, and I don't really want to talk about that. I'm just talking about, people that play poker and don't do any other form of gambling, and it's just a game for them like chess or whatever. So yeah, I mean, this is what the threat looked like for me. If the threat looks like for you, how am I going to pay my rent? Then you probably need to revisit your bankroll management. But even just like the thought of like, this night is going to suck, like I'm going to feel like I didn't do anything productive with my evening, my win rate's going to hurt for the month, like all of that stuff can play into threat as well. It's going to be a productive activity to sit down and think about what that threat looks like for you. Try not to stop at just like, it sucks, it's stupid, like I'm angry, like whatever. I challenge you to recognize that there's probably a fear beneath that anger. And I think you should try to figure out and understand what that is. Okay. The third way, and the sort of optimal way to deal with a stressful circumstance, is to interpret it as a challenge, meaning something that you can overcome, and in doing so, you are able to benefit, improve in some way. So some people, they think they have a final exam in a week. They think, if I fail this exam, I'm not going to get into medical school. And if I don't get into medical school, my family's going to hate me. And if my family hates me, then I'm going to be depressed. And if I'm depressed, then I'm not going to be able to hold down a job, and whatever. They spiral out of control. And other people think, oh, awesome. Like, this is my first test as a pre-med. Like, I can't wait to find out what that's like and learn how I can do better for next time. That person sounds like way too chipper for me, but you get the idea, right? Like, there is a way to frame what's happening to you as an opportunity. And it really is that way with tilt, because it will be something everyone has to challenge themselves to deal with. You're not alone in that, just like everyone has to deal with being in a 3-bet pot. And so it's a chance to study. It's a chance to get better at something that is literally part of the game, not something to be ignored. So start trying to think about how to consider it a challenge, but I'm going to give you some more tips on how to do that. This is another aspect of threat, right? So we talked about playing outside of your bankroll in the sense that like you can't make rent. There's another way in which you can be playing outside of your bankroll, I think, which is just that like just not being comfortable with losing that amount of money, right? Like when I was playing 200 NL and having decent resolve, and I was up, like 7 buy-ins or something, I was playing too high stakes in the sense that I wasn't sure that I could beat those stakes. And in playing them, I was putting myself in a position where I knew I would end up feeling foolish were I to discover that, uh, it was all a mistake. Like if I lost 3K or something, I would be fine. I would figure out how to deal with that. That would be okay. But the problem was more, I just feel like an asshole. So, this is like something you might want to consider when thinking about your bankroll. And, if you can afford to lose it, but you have that same kind of problem as I do, you just need to be aware that you're going to be exposed to a higher likelihood of feeling threat than you would in another circumstance, and double down on that idea of challenge. It's like, okay, this is actually a period where I'm going to grow and learn faster and more than I'm going to in like 8 months where I'm really comfortable with these stakes and I'm complacent. I'm learning skills now for when I take a shot at the 25-50 game at the Bellagio in 5 years. Skills about like how to deal with big losses, how to deal with being unsure if I can beat a game, how to deal with just like lacking confidence and trying to build that in myself. So if you're in my situation, that's what I would do. And if you're in the situation where you're like not sure you can pay rent, please just like don't play those stakes. Okay, so setting yourself up to interpret the stimulus as a challenge instead of as a threat, it's going to start before the poker table. It's going to start before you sit down that session. In fact, if you're putting like say an hour a day into studying, you should be putting 15 minutes a day into this tilt stuff. 5 minutes a day reflective journaling on what your deepest fears are with poker, and then 10 minutes before the session, you can do this thing, meditation. Meditation is going to be net positive. It might be a small net positive, but it's going to be a net positive, and you're going to get more out of it than the time you put in. So it's just getting ace king suited instead of ace king off. Like it's just a free roll. So take that time away from studying, put 5-10 minutes of it into meditation. If you find out it doesn't work for you, then you can scrap it. But trust me, you're going to feel more confident, more collected, more ready when you sit down to play. I know it's like a cliche at this point, but yeah. Okay, so the other things to do before you sit down at the poker table are really to confront what the worst case scenario will look like for you is. I know some people have like read The Secret or whatever, or they just have this intuition that you shouldn't dwell too much on things that you're like concerned about or that might happen. But I actually think that at least if you're like me, this is productive. This is also something that you would do in CBT. So you would usually do this in CBT if like the person said, I can't stop thinking about this or whatever, not so much if it wasn't on their mind, but you're going to have trouble not thinking about it if it happens to you during the session, right? Like, I can't believe I'm so unlucky, whatever. So put yourself in that situation because there's a 30% chance it's going to happen even if you're a winning player, right? So ask yourself, okay, imagine for a second that I lose 3 buy-ins or, I lose 1 buy-in less than my stop loss. What does that actually mean for me? Like, what are the consequences of that? And if I say the consequences of that are like I'm a loser or something, then what is there evidence of that actually? Or is the only thing that I can find genuine evidence for something like, well, I've lost a buy-in and I have 50 buy-ins for live or something like, or I've lost 4 buy-ins and I have 50 buy-ins for live. You should really walk yourself through that worst case scenario and get to a place where you feel really certain about what that worst case scenario means for you. And you know what? If you can't get to a place where you've really locked down what that worst case scenario is, and even before you sit down at the table, it still feels pretty bad, then you're probably playing too high. And so then, similar to the challenge thing, I'm going to ask myself, what are my goals with poker, and how are my goals being achieved just by walking into that room, regardless of the outcome? I'm going to remind myself that Poker is a game of wins and losses. It's about minimizing your losses and maximizing your gains. And every time that I play, and I play well, and I reduce my tilt, and I do all things right, I'm getting better. I'm making it repetition. I'm making it part of a pattern. I'm making it something that I just know in my sleep. And so I am achieving my goal just by walking into that room. And that's like a kind of surrender, right? Like that if I just go and I just play my best, I will have succeeded. Sometimes it's something you say and really in the back of your head you're going like, yeah, let's go play. Really try to internalize that. And then third, think about strategies that are relevant specifically for you, what you're going to do to adjust after a bad result. Make a plan beforehand. Am I going to get up and go for a walk? Do I have a stop loss? Am I going to run myself through some CBT exercises? Am I going to kind of remind myself about what my opening ranges are so I don't play random hands, and what my 3-bet percentages are so I don't just like start 3-betting any mixed hand? That's something I probably would do, or at least used to do live. It's just like, King Jack suited, sometimes 3-bet, I'll just 3-bet it here. So yeah, like how can I kind of walk myself through what I talk to myself about before the session when I have a bad result? Yeah, so we just kind of talked about this already, but basically CBT is kind of the gold standard in psychology, and it's just something that has notable improvement for people with minimal effort, and it's also something that you don't need an expert to do. ChatGPT will help you practice CBT, tons of articles on CBT, there's books on CBT. So CBT plus meditation, I think, is like the great starter cocktail to reducing tilt and improving your psychology with poker. There's other stuff we could get into, but this is, I think, the great starting place. And I would bet my house that like 95% of players plus are not doing either of these things before each session. Yeah, okay, so that's my video. Just to really take this stuff into account, and hopefully it will help you avoid some punts in the future and help you play your best. Okay, take care everybody. Run good.